Hello, Bloomfield families. This is Jason Bradburn, principal here at Bloomfield Elementary. I want to talk about the upcoming school year. We just finished our first full week, and so there's some changes that are going on here at the school, and I want to give you kind of the behind the scenes and the rationale and the reasons for these particular changes. And so I think it's important that I made a video and kind of talked about these. So let's get started. So the big question is, why change? Why do we need change? It's worked here, it's worked there, whatever, and it has for a long time. But the world is changing very rapidly in a way that I don't know that we can fully appreciate yet. And so we're preparing kids for a world that we have no idea what it's going to look like. And so it's important that we give them, every skill that they're going to need. And so whether whatever career path they decide, or if they decide to trade or whatever, everything looks vastly different than it did, especially when I was growing up. Just the technology and everything, from tractors and everything else. So it's important that they have every advantage, that they get a world-class education at Bloomfield Elementary. And so our focus needs to be on things that help move students forward. And so my teachers will often probably roll their eyes when they hear me say it, but it's something that I'm constantly repeating, and that is that we only have so much time and we only have so much energy. We have to make sure that we are focused, the time that we're utilizing, the things that we're doing matter. And so, if it doesn't move a student and it doesn't help a student, unless it's required by the state of Indiana law or Bloomfield School District board policy, we're not going to do it. We're going to focus on things that matter. And so that's where we are beginning to make that change. And so that's kind of the idea behind some of the policy changes as well. And so let's look at, first off, homework policy update. And so I put kind of. Some teachers didn't give homework. And so it's important to understand that homework is, there's a lot of research out there. And it's not completely conclusive, but if you break it down, like for the K-5 level, there's a lot of it is leaning well in the direction that it has very, very little benefit to the academic success of a child. And so that matters. Now, what does matter, or what does have an impact, is a child reading 20 minutes a night. And so encourage your child to read, and it should be something that he or she enjoys. And then have them, by supporting them, you can ask them to tell you about the story. That doesn't mean like, hey, what color boot were his boots? What kind of hat did he wear? Instead, just ask more open-ended questions like, hey, tell me about this story. What happened? And so let them walk through the details. And so that's a skill that's very, very important, and one that will improve over time. And so this also gets you to be able to ask questions. Like, when they tell you a detail, you're like, oh, well, what happened then? Or why didn't so-and-so? And so and then it becomes a conversation. And it's not just over a test. And so that's where that love of learning, or that love of reading, really comes from. We teach them all of the skills that they need in order to be successful in breaking that text down. And we'll talk about that here shortly as the curriculum change that'll be coming up in a few slides. But, I just want to say we're all human. And so, we work all day. You work all day, and it's, you just don't want to come home and after you've worked all day and then work more. I think back of the old, the painter's house is never painted, the contractor's house is never fixed, or the auto mechanic's wife's car is never repaired. And there's a reason for that is they work all day doing those things and they just don't want to come home and do them. And so kids aren't any different. They don't want to sit at school and do math and language arts and history and science and then come home and do it until they go to bed. And so for us, it's all about educating the whole child. And so there's a lot of research that shows that there is a lot of benefit, a reduction in anxiety of that child, to connect with family and friends when they go home, playing, interacting with one another, just disconnecting. A lot of parents and kids are in sports, and so to keep a kid out, I used to do the clock when I taught middle school, and so I've taught elementary and taught middle school. And so one of the things I always noticed, I guess, during the clock was that some of these kids didn't get home till late. I mean, we left that field between 9 and 10 o'clock. And so I think, wow, these are at that time it was middle schooler. I'm thinking, they're going to go home. I mean, they still get home. They got to, probably take a shower, get ready for the next day. They just got done playing games all night. They're going to be, and if they had any homework, they're going to be really, really tired. Or it's going to be, sit down and we'll give you all the answers. And so the value of that homework is not all that good. And so they really should, like I said, disconnect and focus on the things that matter to them outside of the school. When you're here, we work hard, play hard. So, yeah. Parents can still request homework. And so, the only caveat to that is that I told the teachers if they want to give like additional practice, there is a lot of value, like in, for instance, doing multiplication facts. So if they want to do that and then they want to let them work on those through the week, and when they've completed them, have that as a reward, like an additional recess or some type of computer time or something, free time on the end of the day on Friday or something. Those are the things that for me matter, because then you're kind of compensating time with time as well. Now, I don't want to do grades, and I'll tell you why. So grades should be a reflection of a student's mastery on that particular skill. And so you'll notice this year we have English language arts, which is pretty broad. I mean, it's a big umbrella. And so there's a lot of things that go into that. And so there'll be subcategories within that. You'll see things like comprehension, you'll see phonics, you'll see vocabulary, word work, that kind of thing. And so when the teacher's given that assessment at the end of the week, doing that weekly checkup, they're going to be logging the scores in there. And it's important because that tells you as a parent where your child may be struggling. If I just said they had a D in language arts, you're going to be wondering, well, where's that D at? Instead, you'll see, well, they're struggling in phonics, and so that allows you to reach out to the teacher or even go to the internet and say, how can I help my child who is struggling in phonics in, the first grade? And so that gives you more information as a parent. Also, to identify like learning disabilities and whatnot, usually a child will do good in math and will struggle in ELA or language arts, reading, all that. And so what it allows us to do is it allows us, if we try to put a bunch of extra credit in there, then that child who maybe have like serious deficits or, like I said, with because of a learning disability in phonics and comprehension and vocabulary, we're not going to see that if we are throwing a bunch of extra credit on it, and a bunch of what I like to call fluff, and say, oh well, that child's got an A in language arts, and hey, it's great. Meanwhile, we'll just push that child through, and then they don't get the support that they need. And so when grades fall, it usually sounds the alarm bells for us as parents and educators, that there's something that needs to be done, and gets us to act. And a lot of the tests too in identifying learning disabilities are not all that great. And when it comes to grades like 1 and 2, mostly because they're just the way that they're written is not good. And so if you're seeing this pattern in phonics and these deficits that go over time, that is great data that we can share, with the school psychologists and say, look, here are the different components of reading, and this is what they've done over time, and you can begin to see trends and be able to look at getting them the additional support that they need as well. And so that's the reason why I don't like to do that to grades. I think kids are going to be naturally motivated to want to make parents proud. We all want to do a good job. And so for them, when they start to falter like that, then it's a time for us to take notice and find out, like, hey, what's this child need? Let's not wait and, kind of be able to turn a blind eye to something that needs to be addressed, a year or 2 years prior to that. It makes it even more difficult to catch up. So keeping focused on things. So in the middle there, kind of halfway down, instructional time must be protected. And so I am a big proponent that every minute matters. We have instructional minutes from the state that says, you have to do it this many minutes, and they have to have this much seat time. And so, but for me, it's important that we maximize that time in there, because that may be the difference between that child finally getting it, and then, struggling. And so for that reason and some other reasons, I want to make sure that I, minimize disruptions to the classroom and everything, and also try to preserve the learning environment. And so, years previous, at least last year, we had, some parties. Some would go for an hour, some would go for an hour and a half or 2 hours. The cupcakes came through all the time, which, don't get me wrong, loved them. But, when you have, 20, 22 kids in the classroom and you're celebrating 20, 22 birthdays, each one of those birthday parties take an hour to 2 hours at a time. You're starting to lose a lot of instructional time. And so one of the things I wanted to change is I wanted to make it more, organized, more structured, for parents and teachers, along with our learners, our students. And so, for example, we had here on the bullet point here where I have an example for like this Friday, which would have been today. We celebrated from 1 to 1:50 because early dismissal, so the last 50 minutes of school. And so the kindergarten and first grade got to celebrate their birthdays, and those students who had birthdays in the month of July and August. And so the idea is that parents and teachers work together and reach out to one another, determine who can bring what to the party. So whether that's a spreadsheet with like, hey, I got the cupcakes, hey, I got the napkins, whatever the case may be. And it also allows us to celebrate birthdays that may occur like on the weekend or during the summer. And so, when we're doing this in August, we're making sure that we get July. And on the end of it, in May, we're making sure that we celebrate May and June birthdays as well. And so everybody kind of comes together, celebrates, the party for 50 minutes. And it's great. It doesn't, disrupt too much. It's once a month. It's 50 minutes. And then we can kind of get back to work. So like next Friday, August 22nd, 2025, from 1 to 1:55. They dismiss a little bit later. Second and third grade will celebrate birthdays for the month of July and August. And so kindergarten, first grades work it again. And then the next week, we'll do, fourth and fifth grade. And then we'll kind of start over for our September birthday parties, starting with, K1. They'll do it on a Friday again. So that's the idea behind it. Still celebrating. Still making sure that we're minimizing disruptions, and just being a little bit more organized when it comes to those celebrations as well. All right, so changing curriculum. The science of reading is a mandate by the state, and I happen to agree with it. So it's change, and change is hard, and we don't like the change. We're all human. We resist it. We go fighting, and we claw and kick and, anything that we can do. But it's important that we do that. And there's, the reason why is, we changed in education to a different type of literacy called balanced literacy. And the state is trying to force us because we honestly probably need to be pushed in that direction in order to go back to structured literacy. And I'll talk about the differences in that and what that looks like in the classroom and why that's important. And so the big thing is, like I put in the bottom bullet point there, change creates fear. It's this fear that leads to misinformation about positive changes. I believe that changing to the science of reading is extremely positive for a lot of different reasons. One, there's a massive amount of research back there that backs it. Two, there are skills, which I'll talk about the last slide of, the things that I've seen as principal here, and being able to talk about like where those problems were and where we kind of dropped the ball using balanced literacy. And so one of the big advantages of the science of reading is it is huge. It is very big, supporting students with dyslexia, students with a learning disability. And that's because we're teaching those students we don't have to memorize all these words like we did, like for instance, spelling words. There should be no spelling list that goes home. There's no value in those spelling lists. You're just going to memorize them. You're going to throw them in your short-term memory. You're going to write them 3 times or whatever it is. You are going to take the test. You're going to get a good grade, maybe, and then you're going to move on and you're going to forget about those words. And so that's kind of balanced literacy. And so that is not a good approach to understanding how to break these words apart, how to sound them out. And so that's what we're getting into. So let's look at some examples of, so on the left-hand side, you have balanced literacy. And so why do we go balanced literacy as educators? 15, 20 years ago, whenever they decide, whoever decided to move that direction in whatever particular school or district, may have been longer or whatever, the idea just seemed fun. It just seemed like, yeah, we'll just do this. We have this, we don't have to teach phonics. It's embedded. They'll get it and everything else. And then we have this whole generation of kids that just don't have very good phonics skills. And so, which if it's words that they see all the time and they've memorized, then they'll know that word. But if it's something that they don't see very often, and you'll see this in standardized tests, if it's informational text, nobody sits around usually and reads a lot of informational textbooks. So there's a lot of words in there they don't see very often. And so this causes problems when they're trying to take any kind of standardized test or read any kind of textbook. They can't they don't understand how to decode the words. They don't understand how to break them apart, and they've never seen them, so they didn't memorize them. They weren't on a spelling test, and so therein lies the problem. And so structured literacy is about empowering that student, empowering that child to be able to break those words apart, and then come down and read the sentence like, hey, the dog ran outside ran out of the in garage. And then that student's going to say, oh, garage. And then they're going to come back and say, the dog ran out of the garage, whatever it is. They're going to then repeat it after they've decoded it and put it all together. And then they're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. A lot of times we can hear it, but seeing it, it's important that we're able to break that apart. So phonics may be taught, but lessons are short and do not necessarily follow a scope and sequence. So there's no rhyme or reason, like they're supposed to be taught. If you look over to the right, phonics are taught explicitly. That means that we are teaching them, we are telling them exactly what it's supposed to be doing. If there's a sound, we're telling them how to articulate every little sound and what you're supposed to be doing with your mouth and your tongue and all that kind of stuff. And it's systematic and it's sequential instruction. And so it's not done in a random fashion. It's done as, it needs to go in this order, because when you get here, then this helps to support what you've already learned, but you need to make sure that you learn that. And so you kind of keep this backwards approach, kind of like going forward. We learn this new thing, and we also support the things that we've already learned. And so that's important. So high frequency words, memorizing high frequency words, rote memorization of them. There's, depends on the list that you go with. Depends on how many that you're going to see. And so that the balanced view literacy approach is just kind of like, hey, you just keep writing them down and you'll get them. And then that way you can kind of look at them, and they call them sight words. So on the structured literacy side, high frequency words are taught according to their phonics pattern. And then irregular words that don't follow the rules that they know, then those words are taught explicitly. And so we are, showing them, we are repeating them, we are talking about them. And so the idea is that they, we end up calling them like heart words, them by heart. But there are still a lot of phonics patterns within those that sometimes that does work. And so they have to be taught that way. So misread words are corrected. So if you look on the third from the bottom bullet point on structured literacy, misread words are corrected. Focus is on sounding them out. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's like garage, doing the garage, and then coming back once you've established that that's garage. You don't just move on. No, you're going to come back now that you know it's garage, and you're going to reread it, and then you practice it that way. And then you can kind of continue your reading. The other one is on, balanced literacy. The greatest focus was on the meaning of the text rather than the accuracy of what was read. And so, that's, I don't know, it's not good at all. So the other one, so the second one from the bottom there on balanced literacy, students get better at reading by reading. So that's kind of like, I guess, throw somebody out of a boat and they get better by swimming and swimming, keep swimming, you'll get better. And then, maybe there's some truth to that. And you will, at some point get better, but how much better do you get? Do you truly understand, all the mechanics of swimming and everything else? Probably not. And so the same thing is with reading. Just to read a book, like accelerated reading, and then take a test. And the test is usually multiple choice. It's over random facts. And so there's not a lot of value in that. And so that's kind of why we stepped away from it as a school, because it just doesn't follow the science of reading. And it really becomes, it takes the love out of reading. It takes the fun out of reading. Some kids are competitive. I'm competitive. And I love, I used to love seeing the points and everything like that. And that's separate and apart, from really the love of reading and, what you're trying to achieve by reading. And so on the right-hand side, students get better at reading by learning and practicing the code. The code is the systematic, the breaking, the segmentation, the simplification, and they are breaking those words apart that they don't know, sounding them out. They know exactly where to break them apart, how they should sound, and then they say the word like garage, and then they can reread the sentence. That's how they get better. And then that word at some point will start to just kind of become part of their, they want to sound it out. It'll be automatic. They'll see it and be like, oh yeah, it's garage. At the bottom on balanced literacy, the point of reading instruction is to get children to love reading. So that's not the point of reading instruction. The point of reading instruction, if you look over the right, the point of reading instruction is to teach children how to read. And so being able to read is being able to learn, is being able to read the instruction manual of something, a technical manual, and be able to sound those words out that they may not know, or whatever the case may be. And so now, a little bit different of approach. So here's a 2-sit tour of structured literacy, so you can see the different components of structured literacy. Phonology. So you see the study of sound, structure, spoken words. Phoneme awareness is an essential component to literacy instruction. sound symbol correspondence, syllables, morphology, syntax, semantics. And so all of these things go into this is part of their word work and everything else that they're doing in their reading block and their reading. So that is going to be something that they're going to be working on. So when it's not going to be the traditional like reading that we knew that we grew up with. And so, they're going to be sounding things out and breaking things apart. They're going to be talking about CVC, open vowels. They're going to know all of that. They can tell you where to break that apart once they start to master those skills. And so, finally, we're just looking at this is going to be tough. And so, I promise you, we did this last year with third grade. I met with a lot of the parents and talked to them and said, look, it's new. The kids are going to struggle. And as parents, we want to be like, oh my God, I'll help you. I'll tell them like, this is too hard. You shouldn't be doing this. I ask, please don't do that. Just tell your child wants you to be proud of them when the grades fall. You don't have to scold them. You can say, hey, look, you're going to get this. You're going to get it. And when you get it, you're just, there's sky's the limit. And so we saw that with our reading scores last year that dramatically improved in third grade. Year over year, iRead was really successful. It was just vastly different, but it was a struggle at first. And now they have really done a fantastic job. So please, please, please encourage them. It will make all the difference in the world. And just keep, constant contact with your teacher, your child's teacher, and ask them how they, that you can support them and whatnot. But for the most part, they're going to keep practicing that. It's just a set of tools, and each week they're going to practice it. So they didn't get it that week, it's okay. They're going to continue to practice those set of skills, and those can be applied to anything. So they can apply to any story, anything that they see. So that is the difference. It's instead of trying to remember everything, it's here's the tools you need to do what you need to do to read, to break it apart, to sound it out, and it empowers that student to do that. So thank you so much for your time. I know this is kind of long, but I also feel it was extremely important to have this conversation about all the changes here at Bloomfield. Feel free to stop in, reach out anytime. So thank you for your support, and I will talk to you soon.